Hello there, it's Carrie Rhoades here. Welcome back to the Trinity Stamps YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be playing with some dies to create my own plaid background to make some fun Valentine's cards with these new gnomes. So I have the hip to be square die that's going to be the base for my plaid, and then I'm going to bring in the stitched strips die set and play with those to create my plaid background. So I'm going to use the second to the smallest and third to the smallest, I guess you'd call them, strips for this piece. I have 3 of one size and 4 of the other, and then I wanted to show you the tiniest one because it is so cute, and I will actually end up using that, but I didn't know that at this time. So I have a panel of cardstock that's just cheap white cardstock. It's 8.5 by 3.5, and I'm going to glue my hip to be square die cut to that. So I am using 3 different shades of pink for this card. So this is my mid-tone pink that I glued down from the hip to be square die, and then these small strips are from my darkest pink. So I'm going to glue those so they go down the center of each column of squares on this card. So I can use one strip 2 times and this will fit good. So I'm doing this edge to edge, and with these small squares, I found it really easy to line it up without the assistance of a ruler, but a T-square ruler would come in really handy for making these cards, and I will actually use that on card number 2. But it's just, with a small space that already has straight edges, it's pretty easy to eyeball it as well. So that will be, I believe, 7 rows across on this panel or columns, and then I'm going to do the wider strips on the rows. So there's 3 rows, and I have my lightest color pink now, and I'm adding those on with liquid glue and really making sure that I'm pressing down well because it's being glued down to a surface that is bumpy. All right, so when I got to this point, I was going to glue this down, and for some reason adding that top layer just didn't feel right to me, although now when I'm watching it back, I don't know why. I think it looks great, but I played around with what I wanted to do. I tried, oh, maybe these skinny strips, maybe in black, maybe if I do this. And that's kind of what happens when you're card making. Sometimes you have to play with it and figure out what you like the best, and that's just part of the deal. That's how it goes. So I actually ended up using the skinniest pink strip, and I didn't use the second hip to be square die over the top. Kind of wishing now that I did, though. I don't know, it just seemed like it took away from it somehow. So I needed a frame, so I took out these stitched card panel and windows from Trinity, and I am cutting the 2 largest together at the same time. This is going to create a stitched frame, and maybe that's what I was having trouble with, is that all the strips I used were stitched, but the hip to be square is not stitched. So this is going to give me a stitched panel that goes all the way around the outside of that plaid, and I can save the middle piece for another time. So I glued that on, and I glued on those skinny pink strips, and then I needed to trim away because some of the background was showing beyond the edge of my frame that I just glued on. So I was able to do that with my guillotine style trimmer, and there you can see the plaid up close and all the stitching. Now I'm going to do some stamping. I'm bringing in 2 of the newest Gnome stamp sets. The first one is There's Gnome One Like You, and Sending Smooches is the second one with the bow and arrow. They're so cute. They're like little cherubs or little cupids. And a gnome, I mean, I can't even stand how cute these are. They're little toes. Yeah, I love all the gnomes from this release. I really do. So I still have one I have not made a card for, so you'll probably see that coming up soon from me. And I hope it's not overload, but they are so cute. Let me know what you think of these gnomes in the comments below. So I am coloring this one obviously in pinks, so it matches this card. The gnome at the top will be for card number 2. And did you know these gnomes have little bloomers on? It shows just on one of their legs, and I did not realize that at first, and I thought it was cuteness overload. It really was. So here I am using RV21 as my lightest color, and RV43 as my darkest. I'm going to have all the markers on the screen at the end. In case this moves too fast for you, you can check out all the colors I used after I finish coloring the second gnome. So it's a little ways at the end of the video. But I used the same colors for both gnomes as far as the skin and the beard. So C2 will be my lightest or my darkest color for the beard, and then my lightest is C0. I wanted it to be just a really soft gray color, so I just color around the edges and blend it out. And then for my wings, the feathers, and the scallop around the hearts, I'm using a jelly roll pen that is glittery, shimmery, stardust, I believe. And then I'll add some highlights with my white gel pen, and I added freckles on his cheek. That's like my favorite thing. Favorite thing with these gnomes. So now I'm going to die cut out both pieces. There is a die for everything in this mini stamp set, and that makes me super happy. Speaking of my sentiment, I'm going to glue that down to 2 other die cuts that I used with the same die that I die cut out the sentiment. So that's going to make it pop up a little bit and keep it really sturdy, because this is kind of an odd shape. If I used a foam strip, it could show through in some of the skinnier areas. So using the die cuts is really helpful. I'm going to pop up my gnome with some foam squares, and then I just need a little bit of embellishment. So I have this like specialty mix from Trinity that was probably a free gift with order, and I am pouring out the whole thing, digging through it, finding these tiny little hearts to glue on. And these are clay hearts. They do sell these clay hearts individually, so I'll link those below. Then I glued this onto my 8.5 by 7 card base that was scored at 3.5 inches, and that finishes up card number 1. There's so many possibilities with this plaid. I had to make a second one. So now I have this new Slimline die with the hearts. Isn't it amazing? It is the Slimline Tall Heart Trio. There's also one that goes the long way. So I'm gluing that down to another cheap piece of cardstock that is 8.5 by 3.5, and I'm taking the smallest die in the stitched strips set in black, and I'm going to add those to the hearts. So I'm going to go across 2 times on each heart. Now this is where I decided the use of a T-square ruler would really help, because I don't have any straight lines on my background to refer to. And by the way, having the background have the hearts on it is really just a guide for me versus trying to glue this down to a plain piece of cardstock and then putting the hearts over the top. So that's why I had the Hip to Be Square panel glued down. I was also going to glue it over top, and the same thing here. I glued down my trio of hearts on the bottom so I could line up my plaid pieces, and then I'll glue it down over the top. It also helps me line up the one I'm going to glue down over the top. So it's just a guide. I'm using my die cuts as a tool. All right, now I am taking the second to the smallest, the next largest stitched strip, and gluing those down onto my card over the top of the ones I already glued down. So these ones will go top to bottom, and again the use of that T-square ruler really helps. So I put one straight down the middle of the heart, and then I'm putting one down the sides of the heart so that it starts at the highest peak of the heart on each side. Now here I am trimming off the excess before I glue on my top panel. That's really important. It was so much easier to trim it first than when I glue my top panel on. I don't have any peeking out, and I don't have to trim away any of that top piece. So now I laid my top panel on just to kind of get a feel for how it looked, and I decided I needed a little bit more in there, so I die cut the skinniest ones again, this time from a gray cardstock, and I'm gluing them on the inside of my 2 outermost strips. Yeah, we'll call them strips. All right, I have some Stickles glitter gel in Moon Dust I'm going to add to my top panel. Now this top panel is Nina Classic Crest Solar White in 110 pounds, so super thick cardstock. Because I'm not using a stencil, I'm adding this to the entire panel like a crazy person, because I like to be wild and go for things like this. So I added back in the die cut hearts, which, by the way, the hearts that get cut from this panel, they are also etched on the edge with a line. So a line is pressed into those hearts that are die cut out. That same embossed line is around the very edge of this die cut too. So this has an embossed line and stitching around the hearts. It's really cool. I love that new detail in these dies. They also have circle and rectangle dies with this etching in them, so make sure and check those out. All right, so I'm going to let that dry, and now I'm going to move on to coloring out my second gnome, and this is the Sending Smooches gnome. I'm using R17, R39, and R29 for my red, and I'm not going to show coloring of his skin or his beard because I did already show that on the first gnome, but with his hat, I'm starting with C2 as my lightest color. I'm going to bring in C6 as my darkest and add in everywhere I want the shadows to be. I'm going to blend that out with my mid-tone, which is C4, and then I always go back in with my lightest to blend those together, and that finishes up that. I use the same shimmer pen for the wings and feather, and then also my white gel pen. So those are all the markers I used on today's cards. Now I have my dry panel. It looks amazing and yummy. I love it so much. So I'm going to glue that down to a second piece just because it's wonky. So I die cut that second piece from what I'm calling cheap cardstock. It's a ream of cardstock that I bought at Walmart. So that's what I use for things like this, where you don't want to use your good cardstock. So I glued that down to my card base. I'm going to let that dry, and I used my graham cracker alphabet to die cut out XOXO from black, and then I'm going to adhere all the things to my card. So XOXO at the bottom, my gnome with some foam squares and some hearts, and then I did pop up my sentiment with some extra cardstock like I did on the first card. I wanted to show you that this actually does fit into a regular business-sized envelope, even though that gnome hangs off the edge. Most slimline or business-sized envelopes that you buy like in the office supply section are 4 1/4 inches wide, so I knew this was going to fit. Also, I am stamping the inside of both cards with Happy Valentine's Day, and it's from the Sending Smooches set, and I didn't want to let those hearts go to waste that had all that glitter on it, so I put one on the inside of each card. And that finishes up my DIY plaid cards for Valentine's Day. I hope that you have enjoyed this video. I would love to know if making your own plaid with strips like this seems fun to you, or is it maybe too much? I love making my own backgrounds, so it was so much fun for me to make these. I will be back again next Saturday with a video for Trinity stamps, so make sure you tune in. If you're new here, we would love for you to subscribe and hit the little bell, then you'll know next time Trinity has a new video. I hope you're having a fabulous week, and happy stamping. Bye.